Hey, I'm Clayton Strems, and I'm going to teach you part 2 of screen printing with the Cricut and how to use multicolor. So before we get started, let's get changed. So here we are in the last shirt that I screen printed in that last video. If you haven't watched that video, go back and watch it. It shows you how easy screen printing really is and your pros and cons versus vinyl and screen printing. So today I'm going to show you how to do the multicolors, and it's a lot easier than you think, just going to take a little bit more time. So let's look at supplies and then I'll show you exactly how to do it. The supplies we need for our design to use our Cricut is a mat. I like to use the standard grip mat. We're gonna need some transfer tape. Since I'm doing 2 colors, I need 2 sheets of vinyl. I like to use the Removeable Premium Vinyl, and obviously our weeding tool. Screen printing supplies that we need once our design's complete is our screen, the product, and I like to get my stuff from Kohl's because I tend to get really good deals on them. We need our squeegee to bring our ink across. We're gonna need some painter's tape, and then also whatever colors we're gonna be using for our screen printing. So right here I'm using red and white. Make sure you stay until the end of the video. I'm gonna be answering some of the common questions that I get and some tips and tricks throughout the process whenever you go to do it yourself. Here we are in Cricut Design Space. So it's a love-hate relationship for me, at least, with this software. Love it but hate it. So I've actually already designed everything, as you can see. We're gonna be doing a shirt that says, "We'll give real estate advice for tacos." I want real estate and tacos to be one color, and we'll give advice for in a different color. So these are gonna be our 2 different colors. You see these squares here. So if you're doing a design that's going to be a lot closer in colors, you're essentially doing exactly what you do when you do multiple vinyls. So it's the same concept. The difference here is we're having to screen print at different times. We can't just interlace everything and then throw it on the shirt. So we're gonna have to do one color, which we'll do white first, and then we'll go do red. So these squares are gonna come in handy. What I'm gonna end up doing is putting note cards on the actual sweatshirts and taping those down. So whenever I swipe my white across, it'll cover up the portion that I need on the note cards. So whenever I go to line everything up, I could put the red, you'll have the squares cut out of my vinyl, so they'll be sitting right there. I could put them right above the note cards in the exact same spot and make sure everything's laid out very nicely and nice and organized and neat. So with the simplified version that I'm doing on these, I don't necessarily need these squares, but I'll show you how they work out in case you're doing something that's a lot tighter on colors. Now, if you're gonna be stacking stuff, think about how you're gonna stack it. You might wanna go from light to dark. So if you're doing white, red, and black, you might want to screen print with white, then do your red, then do your black, because your black should cover up those other colors. So it's just like you're doing multi-levels with vinyl onto a shirt. Nothing really changes. It's just we can't stack them and then iron them on. We gotta print them at different times. So do not forget, whenever you go to cut your vinyl, make sure you hit mirror on both of them. So doing 2 colors, we need to hit mirror on both projects. So remember, when we're weeding, we want to weed out whatever we want to actually end up on our product, on our shirt or whatever you're making. Now let's get it on our screen. So here we have our screen. This is how it's going on. So I've got a little bit of extra right here. I'm gonna go ahead and cut that off. So here we have our transfer tape. I've got about 10.5 inches. So on the transfer tape, I'm actually going to go a little bit on the outside of this first corner, and it'll just make it easier to peel it off. So on the back of my premium vinyl, it's nice that I have these lines. I've already got my center marked on my screen, so it'll make it a little bit easier to put it on my sweatshirts. So I'm gonna line it up as good as I can, and we'll go ahead and put this onto the screen itself. So right here, we wanna make sure we get all of our air bubbles out. We want it to be nice and smooth so we don't have any ink leak out around these letters. So there's a couple things we need to do before we start throwing ink on our screen. One, we need to make sure that all of this is covered up so we don't accidentally get ink on our sweatshirt. The other thing we need to do is we have our note cards. So we want to put the note cards on the other side of here and tape them down. That way, whenever we go to put our second screen on there, we can line up our squares perfectly and get everything centered correctly, and we don't have to stress there. And this will definitely help, especially if you're doing a lot of pieces. And again, we're trying to save money here. We're not trying to go buy all this fancy big equipment. So let's throw this on. So before we call this part done, we do want to lay this back down, make sure that we don't have any blue tape coming into the areas that we're going to actually be putting our ink down on. So now let's cover up our sides with our painter's tape to make sure we don't get any excess paint anywhere we don't want it. So one last thing, we want to make sure before we get ink on this, we want to put our note cards down on our other sweatshirt. So here we are, note cards are down, I've got my positioning, we got our words, we're all centered up where I think I want this. I actually might want to pull it down just a tad. And we're gonna start off with our white ink. I usually use a spoon, but I couldn't find a spoon in the office today. So we are going to dab our ink, and I'm actually gonna come across this side and go left to right. All right, so whenever we're pulling the ink across, we want it to be about a 45-degree angle. First, we're gonna fill our screen with the ink, and then we're gonna come back through and we'll really press it onto the sweatshirt. So I want to come across this just so I don't have too much ink on those note cards. And we are good on this one. So let's pull it up, set it to the side. Boom. First is done. You can see we've got our square. So when we lay down our next one, we'll be able to line it up perfectly and life will be good. So whenever you lay your product down, make sure it's all nice and flat, make sure it's not stretched out, make sure it's not scrunched up, and make sure the back is nice and flat, because if the back has a little crease in it, whenever you swipe across, it's gonna catch too much ink on one side, not enough on the other, and it's just gonna look really funky. So this part gets a little bit trickier, which I don't think I talked about in the first video. Make sure you're pretty much leveled out where you want to be whenever you go to drop your screen, because you do have a little bit of ink behind where the lettering is. So we want to make sure we're as close as we can. It looks even, it looks centered. I could start off on one side where I know there's no ink. Boom, lay it down. You can see our note cards are there. We can see nothing's filled in. Like we're going to be able to get our ink across. Everything looks great. Actually, it looks like I used a little bit too much ink, but that's okay. So I haven't done this a lot. Remember, this is really easy. Haven't done it a million times. If I could do it, you could do it. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this screen off, and all this extra ink, throw it back in there. You can see I've done a lot of projects. I'm probably at, I don't know, 25 projects so far with this white, and I still have more than half of it. So just take your ink, throw it back in. So you can see I actually made a little boo-boo. I didn't pay close enough attention, and I got some of the ink on this actual tape. I'm gonna peel this tape back a little bit and see if I could just live with it, or if I need to get a little paintbrush. So this isn't gonna be perfect, but you know what? It'll be okay. It's close enough as an R. So silly mistake. See, we all make them. Cleaning is simple. We are literally just gonna pull off the back. We're gonna pull off our tape. We're gonna pull off our temporary vinyl. And then we're just gonna use water to clean it. So day one's complete. It only took about 10 minutes from start to finish because I already had the supplies. And if you take out me moving around the video so y'all can get a better view of everything. If I had a heat gun and a second screen, I could actually use that heat gun to dry the ink and then actually move over to that second color. But I'm doing things on the cheap, which is probably why you're watching this video too, right? At least a good chunk of y'all. So I'm gonna let my screen dry overnight. I'm gonna let the ink dry overnight, and when it is dry to the touch, then I can move on to the second color. So I'll see y'all tomorrow. Here we are, day 2. So our screen, dry. Our ink, dry. We're ready for red, the next coat. So let's go ahead and throw on our design and get her ready. So now that we're ready to place our design onto the actual screen, we don't really have to worry so much about centering it because we have the marks with our squares on where they're supposed to go. So that'll center it and that'll take care of everything. So we're just gonna line this out. Remember, flip it over, get it pushed down real nice. Make sure you don't have any bubbles sitting in there. So here we are. We've got our first sweatshirt and we've got our design. And if you look close enough, you can see I am lining this up now so we don't make the same mistake, because this is actually one of the ones that got the blue tape there. And you can see right here, if I were to lay this down and screen print across it, I'm actually going to end up covering up some of my T and A. So we need to get that cut. Check and make sure everything's gonna look good. I don't see any tape. And to be on the safe side, we are gonna check our other one. Because remember, once we get ink on this screen, it's gonna be difficult to try to lay things down and then pick it up and move it, because you could get ink on your product. So this one's lining out perfect, except I got some blue tape right here on this R. So let's get that cleaned up. And because where the tape was sitting, I know I probably need to cut some of this as well. Boom, it looks perfect. Let's throw our ink on. Both of our sweaters are ready. So since I'm not worried about covering up these with ink, if I was you, I'd probably go wash your hands first. But I don't have much time. I had about 10 minutes start to finish of this section. And there we go, 2 colors, simple. A little bit of a mistake, but you know, whatever. So we're gonna let these dry for another day, and then we'll come back and we'll actually press on our ink. So I'll see y'all tomorrow. Here we are, day 3. I'm not gonna bore you with that final step of ironing it, pressing it. Just get a lot of good heat on your ink that goes onto the shirt. That'll fuse it all together, make it stick really well before your first wash. And then outside of that, you don't need to do anything special when you wash it, unless your shirt instructs you to wash a certain way. So it's done. As you can see, it's really, really simple. And the difference between 1 color and 2 color or 3 colors, just add an extra day essentially for every color that you add on. So as promised, here's all of my final tips. So let's talk about your screen and the type of vinyl that you're going to use to put on there. I like to use removable vinyl because I don't have a place to store away a lot of things. But if you want, you could buy more actual screen fabric and only have one screen, and then use iron-on vinyl, iron that on, and then whenever you're done, you could just rinse all the paint off and pull off that actual screen with your iron-on vinyl and store it away somewhere. So you're gonna wanna do that if you're gonna be using that same design over and over and over again. That way you're not wasting removable vinyl. So there's lots of different colors, there's a lot of different brands. I just personally like Speedball. Make sure whenever you go to purchase it, you're looking at what it's actually made for. So I know I've accidentally bought stuff that's actually made for paper and not for shirts, so pay attention to that whenever you go to purchase it. Which brings me to my next point. Let's say you're gonna make a bunch of coasters or koozies or something like that for maybe a wedding, for a party, anything like that. If you get the right ink, you could actually just screen print a bunch of koozies all at one time and be done, instead of having to do vinyl and cut it and, you know, peel it on and iron it on. So it could be a really good route. So screen printing isn't just for t-shirts and sweaters and things like that. It could also be for metal, it could be for paper, it could be for all kinds of things. So just make sure you buy the correct ink for whatever project you're going to be working on. So if you have any tips yourself, make sure you leave them in the comments below. I'm sure everybody would love to hear them. If you have any questions, ask away. As you see, the community is amazing, and there's a lot of people that have tried it. There's a lot of people that are thinking about trying. So let me know if you do try it, how it turned out for you. I would love to see those pictures. As always, hit that like button, subscribe, hit that little bell up in the corner if you want to get notified of videos like this, and I will see you next time.